Good morning friends, welcome back to Parnika tutorials. In the last few videos, I have discussed how can we add the constraints while creating the table and also using the alter statement. Like the constraints are not null constraint, unique constraint, check constraint, primary constraint and foreign key constraint. I hope you have watched those videos. If you did not watch those videos, I request you to go back and watch that video and come back to this video. In this video, I want to discuss how can we manage the constraints, like how to view the constraints which are there for the existing table, how to disable the constraint for a particular column, how to enable the constraint, how to drop the constraint. All these concepts I will discuss in detail for you. So I sincerely request everyone to watch the complete video for better understanding. Once we have created the table with the constraints, if you want to look at what are the constraints are there, then you can view the constraints. If you want to disable a particular constraint, that also you can do. Once you have disabled, if you want to enable the constraint, that concept will call it as enabling the constraints. If you want to drop the constraint permanently, that also we can do. So all these things we will learn now. We need to view the constraints. We have the data dictionary called user underscore constraint. Everything should be in lowercase. This is a data dictionary, is useful for you to look at the constraints. Then you can use the command called desc user underscore constraints. Now this one will be useful for you to view the constraints. I will go to the SQL plus and first I will create a table. So I will write create table. Table name is example1 and then I will specify ID which is a number of size 20. Then I will provide constraint. Constraint name I will write as ID underscore primary and the type of the constraint is primary key. Then I will give another column as name and the data type is varchar2 of size 20 and then I will provide the constraint name. This time I will provide as name underscore unique. Okay, every name should be unique and type of the constraint I will provide as unique. And then I will take the marks which is a number and the mark should not be null value. Then I will write constraint name I will write marks underscore not null 1 and then I will provide the type of the constraint as not null and then I will give the age which is a number of size 20 and then I will write constraint name as age underscore check 1 and the type of the constraint is check on age should be greater than 0. Now let me end with a semicolon. The table has been successfully created. If you want to look at the description of the table, you can look at DESC example1. Now we have 4 attributes called ID, name, marks, age. ID is having the constraint called primary key. Primary key is what? It is a combination of not null and unique. So that's why here it is mentioned as not null and the type of the data is number 20. On name we have a constraint called unique. On marks not null. On age we have the check. Now you can see all the constraints we could not able to see, but only we can able to see the name of the attributes and the data type. If you want to look at the constraints, you can use the data dictionary called user underscore constraint. So I will write DESC user underscore constraints end with semicolon. Now you can see we have the owner, constraint underscore name, constraint underscore type, table name. All these are attributes are there. Now if you want to look at the existing constraints for the particular table, because just now we are using the how to view the constraints, but for the existing table I want to view the constraints. How we can do, look at here. We have the data dictionary, as I said, user underscore constraint. Using that one, we can view all the constraints for the existing table. The command you have to give is, or the statement you have to give is select statement. From select, then you have to write the attribute name as constraint underscore name, and then type of the constraint also. So constraint underscore type from data dictionary called user underscore constraints, and then from where you need to look at where table underscore name, you need to provide the table name, and the table name should be provided within the single quotes because it considers a string, and the table name should be provided in the capital letters. So my table name is example1. From example1 table, for all the constraints whatever are there, I want to look at, then I can give this statement called select. Is useful for you to retrieve the data. What are the fields you want to look at, or what are the attributes you want to look? Constraint underscore name and constraint underscore type from data dictionary called user underscore constraints from or where table name. So I will use select constraint, spelling should be proper, constraint underscore name, comma, constraint underscore type from user underscore constraints data dictionary, where is a class, means from where I need to look at the data. From which? From the table called example1. So you need to write where table underscore name is equal to, within the single quotes, from which table. Just now we have created a table called example1. Now the table name should be provided in the capital letters. Let me end with a semicolon, then you can see constraint underscore name and constraint type. Okay, on marks, what kind of constraint we have given? You can see on marks what we have given, not null, but still it is showing it as a check. So even C is for check and also for not null, and A is underscore check. So what constraint we have given? Check constraint. So check constraint and not null constraint will be displayed as C. And for ID, we have given the ID underscore primary, which is a primary key constraint, and unique constraint. Okay, so these are the constraints names. One is marks underscore not null 1, is underscore check 1, ID underscore primary, name underscore unique. Like this you can able to see that one. You can able to see only the constraint names and constraint type only, but you does not able to find on which column these constraints are there. Am I right? Just when we are looking at the data, we forgot what attribute we have given this one. So that's why we have looked at the previous data. Okay. Now, if you want to view all the columns for which these constraints are there, then you can give the command like this, or the statement like this. One is select constraint underscore name, and then column name. This time you want to see the column name on which attribute you have given the particular constraint, from which dictionary. This time you need to use a dictionary called user underscore cons underscore columns. We have a data dictionary called user underscore cons underscore columns, which is useful for you to know on which columns these constraints are there, where table underscore name, because on which table you want to retrieve, then you need to provide the table name in capital letters. I want to look at the constraints for a particular attributes in the table called example1. Okay, now let me discuss this one practically in the Oracle SQL Plus. I need to write select, which is useful for you to retrieve the data, which is a data query statement. And what are the things you want to look at? You want to look at the constraint name and the column name. So you need to write comma column underscore name from the data dictionary called user underscore cons underscore columns. Then you need to provide which table. So where is a class table underscore name. From which table you want to look at? You want to look at from the table called example1. The table name should be provided in the capital letters. Now you can see the constraint name is id underscore primary. On which column? On the column called id. And the constraint name is name underscore unique. On which column? Name. We have a constraint name called age underscore check1. On which column? Age. Constraint underscore name and constraint column name. Constraint name is marks underscore not null 1. On which column? Marks. So you can able to see the constraint names on particular column, like you have the id underscore primary and you have the column is id. On this attribute you have kept this constraint 1, and if you want to display the constraint type also you can display. Already we have discussed that one. I want to disable the particular constraint using the alter statements. Already we have discussed how to view the constraint. Now next one I want to discuss how to disable the constraint for a particular column using the alter statement. Alter, let me write in capital letters because it is recommended. Alter table name. On which table? Example1. You can provide in the lowercase now. Okay, example1. Then you need to provide disable constraint name. Which constraint you want to remove? See, this is the advantage of providing the constraint names whenever you are creating the table and also whenever you are adding a constraint to the particular column using the alter statement. Already I told you they are optional, but if you give them, it is useful for you to disable the constraint for a particular time, enable the constraint. All these things we can do with the help of the constraint names only. Okay, if you want to enable or disable, then always better to provide the constraint name. So what is the way you can disable the constraint? Alter table example1 disable constraint name. Now we will practically verify in the SQL plus. I will write alter table name is what? Example1. And what constraint I want to remove? I want to remove marks underscore not null 1 constraint. Means on the attribute called marks, I want to remove the not null constraint. If I remove, means if I disable it for a particular time, then it will allow you to insert the null values. We will verify these things. So alter table name. Then you need to provide disable constraint. You want to disable the constraint. Which constraint you want to remove? Okay, marks underscore not null 1. So you need to provide the constraint name also. Now you can look at the table has been altered. If you look at the description of the table now, DESC. Okay, what is the table name? Example1 end with semicolon. Now you can see on marks there is no not null constraint. We will insert the data and then we will look at now marks attribute allows the null values or not. So I will write insert into table name is example1. Then I will take all the columns. One is the ID and then name and age. Now I want to insert the null value to the marks. So that's why in the columns list I have not considered the marks. Then by default it will insert the null value. So I will write values and then I will take 1. And I will write the name as Jagadish and age is 25 end with semicolon. One row has been successfully created. Similarly, we will try to insert one more thing. So I will write example1 ID, then name, age, values. This time I need to provide 2 because on ID there is a primary key. Primary key means not allow the null values and the duplicate values. The primary key is useful for you to uniquely identify a row from the table. Then I will write the name as name. We have provided the unique, so I will give a unique name Ravi. Duplicate names are not allowed. Age should be greater than 0, so I am giving 35. Okay, what happened? We have given the spelling mistake. Okay, let me write the ed and we can write the table name correctly. Example1. Let me save it and then give the backslash. Now the one row is created. If you want to look at all the data, then you can use select star from table name, which is example1. ID is there, name is there, marks is there, age is there. On ID you have the values 1 to, for name Jagdish Ravi, marks null, age 25 and 35. Now I want to enable the not null constraint on the marks attribute. Will it allow? It will not allow, because you have the data. For the data of marks column you have inserted the null values. If you enable, then it will not enable it, because already null values are there. Then how can you enable the not null constraint? So if you want to enable any constraint, you can use a statement called alter table. Table name you need to provide, and then you need to write enable. Okay, enable constraint, and then you need to provide the constraint name, end with a semicolon. Now we will discuss this thing. Alter table. Table name is what? Example1. Enable. Earlier we have disabled. Now we want to enable it. What you want to enable? You want to enable the constraint. Which constraint? Marks underscore not null 1. And with semicolon. Now you can see we got an error. What is that error? Cannot validate. Check constraint violated. Okay, are you able to understand? Check means not null constraint has been violated, because already you have the null data. If you have the null data, how can I again enable the not null constraint? Now what I will do? I will truncate this data. Truncate means what? Removing the data from the table. So how I can use the truncate statement? Truncate table name example1. So I have removed the data. If you want to look at the data, you can write select. The spelling should be correct. Select star from table name, which is example1. Now there are no rows are there. If there are no rows, there is no data. Then if there is no data, you can enable the not null constraint or not. We can verify. How can we enable? Alter table example1 enable constraint. What is the constraint you want to enable? Marks underscore not null 1 constraint you want to enable. Now you can see table has been altered. If you want to look at the description of the table, then you can look at DESC example1. Then for the marks attribute, you can able to see not null constraint. If you want to insert the data now, insert into example1. Now I want to insert the null values to the marks. Then I can use name, ID, name, is values 1 Jagadish. This time I will give J only, and then age is 34. Let me provide. As you are inserting values to the columns called ID, name, age, then by default for marks null value will be assigned, but on the marks attribute you have a constraint called not null, so it will not allow the null values. Look at what will happen. See, cannot insert null into example1 table on the attribute called marks. So again on the marks attribute not null constraint has been enabled. If you want to delete the constraint, then using the alter statement you can disable the or delete the constraint. So alter table name you need to provide, which is example1. Then you can write a drop. What you want to drop? You want to drop a constraint. Which constraint you need to remove? Constraint name you need to provide. So alter table name drop constraint name. Now we will practically verify this one. So I will write alter table. From which table? Example1 table. What you want to do? You want to drop a constraint, and the constraint name is marks underscore not null 1 only we will drop. Okay, so marks underscore not null 1 I am dropping. Then table has been altered. If you look at the description of the table called example1, now there will be no not null constraint. Once you have dropped, can we enable again or not? We will see. Okay, alter table example1 enable constraint. Constraint name is what? Marks underscore not null 1. Now see, cannot enable constraint, no such constraint. You have dropped this constraint called marks underscore not null 1. Once you have dropped, you cannot roll back it or you cannot enable it. And what is the other way of enabling again? You can add the constraint. How to add the constraint? By using the alter table name is example1. This time what you need to write, add. Okay, on which one you want to add? I will write add a column. I want to column also you need to remove, right? In that case you can write the modify. Okay, modify marks number 20. Then I will write constraint name. I will use marks underscore not null 2, and I will write the constraint type is not null. Then table has been altered, so you can look at the description. Okay, DESC example1. Why I have not added the constraint? Because already the attribute is there. If there is no such attribute called marks, then you can write add column name, data type, then constraint name, and constraint type you have to provide. But already marks attribute is there. For this one, not null constraint is not there. Now I am modifying it. So modify attribute. For each attribute you want to modify the data type, constraint name, not null. So now you can see for marks there is a not null constraint, and constraint name this time is marks underscore not null 2. So this is the way we can view the constraints of a particular table. We can disable the constraint, enable the constraint, and drop the constraints, again add the constraints. All these concepts, I hope it is clear for you. If you still have any doubts related to these concepts, feel free to ask me in the comment section. I will try to clear your doubts as early as possible. Thank you for watching the complete video. Have a nice day.